Welcome to the Science of Emotions podcast. In this episode, we will be discussing Human Affectome Project and a capstone paper by Daniela Schiller et al. From 2022. I want to start with this paper because this paper synthesizes a large body of scientific literature and provides a scientific consensus on definitions that disambiguate the commonly used terms affect, feelings, emotion, and mood. First, some background about the field of affective neuroscience, that is, the modern neuroscientific study of emotion. In 1990s, the seminal book by Antonio Damasio, Descartes' Error from 1994, Joseph Ledoux's book, The Emotional Brain from 1996, and Jacques Panksepp's Affective Neuroscience from 1998 ushered in the modern era of scientific study of emotions. Some historical background. During early 20th century, behaviorism demanded or dominated American psychology, with emphasis on only observable behaviors. Cognitive science largely overcame the influence of behaviorism during late 1950s and early 60s in a period often referred to as cognitive revolution. With this shift, psychologists began to focus more on the internal mental processes rather than just the observable behavior, making a shift away from the behaviorist paradigm. By 1970s, the cognitive approach became the dominant perspective in psychology. While cognitive processes such as perception, reasoning, memory, and attention are investigated by means of behavior, tasks, and other objective measures, affective experiences prove to be more difficult to study for several reasons. First, the terminology surrounding the constructs, such as feelings, emotions, and mood, has been vague and inconsistent. Second, despite extensive research, both the academic and colloquial understanding of affective experience is still under debate. Third, there's a lack of consensus on how to study affective experiences systematically. Lastly, introspective verbal report, the gold standard for assessing subjective experiences, is inconsistent and context dependent. This capstone paper attempts to address these challenges. This work is authored by an entire task force of a global interdisciplinary working group of 173 scientists from 26 countries. The Human Affectome is a conceptual umbrella that covers all aspects of human emotional experience. This framework describes a major affective construct, that is, affect, feeling, emotion, and mood, and how these concepts are related to one another and ultimately to human behavior. First, we start by defining the terms. The terms feeling, affect, emotion, and mood have been largely used interchangeably and inconsistently, which has led to much confusion. This paper attempts to clear up this confusion. The first term that's defined is affect. Affect. What is affect? As we explored the affective neuroscience, it's critical that we have a clear definition of affect. Affective states have three fundamental features. First one is valence, an evaluation of the goodness or badness of a state or quality of an experience on a positive to negative spectrum. Motivation. That's the second feature. Motivation implies the directional intensity of an action tendency along the approach to avoidance spectrum. That is, how strongly the person experiencing that affect feels motivated to act in an approach avoidance spectrum towards the source of the affect. And the third feature is arousal, defined as the physiological activation of the autonomic nervous system. High arousal often correlates to high valence and motivation, just as motivational direction often corresponds to valence. Nevertheless, these features are independent since the location on one of these dimensions does not always signify location on the other dimension. Affective states are relative to a comfort zone, a stable but dynamic organismic state. So the person feeling the affective states is related to a comfort zone, and it's a sort of departure from that comfort zone for the organism. Two complementary processes are presumed to maintain a balanced state in an organism. The first one is homeostasis, a regulatory error correcting process that protects an internal set point. And the second process is allostasis, a regulatory error anticipating process that meets their predicted needs using feed forward signals. Homeostasis is a local regulatory process, whereas allostasis is a centralized process that orchestrates multiple parameters based on anticipated needs. Two processes are complementary because allostasis aims to prevent errors that would require a homeostatic response. But homeostasis is needed when errors occur. Allostasis, as the etymology indicates, stability through change, is an advantageous process in an unstable environment because this adjusts the internal parameters as needed rather than maintaining a fixed preset value. Both homeostasis and allostasis arise from autopoiesis, the necessity for an organism to self organize and self generate. Based on these regulatory processes, affective states are inherently allostatic. Affective experience indicate the current allostatic state of organism and its trajectory in an ongoing environment. How at risk are we from leaving the comfort zone, and how to alleviate that risk? Finally, affective states might be considered through the lens of embodied and inactive cognition. That's inactive, inactive cognition. Affect is embodied in the sense that it is not presumed to be encoded by non physical symbolic entities manipulated in the brain, but rather encoded in the material of the entire nervous system, both central and peripheral. Affect is inactive, that's inactive, 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 by virtue of its role in making sense of the environment through sensory motor bodily activity. So, affective states, therefore, can be viewed as inherently geared towards allostatically driven action. So, in sum, we converge on the following working definition of affect. Number one, affect is characterized by metrics of valence, motivation, and arousal, and is inherently about action tendency. Two, affect is anchored to an organism's comfort zone and signifies impending departure from it and action needed to mitigate the resulting risks. Three, affect is an embodied and inactive process. The next term that we explore is feeling. What is feeling? Feelings are the first person conscious mental states that have qualitative character that is experienced. In this broad sense of felt as the raw qualitative aspect that marks all experience, one might define feeling as anything experienced, that is, any first person conscious mental states, such as thoughts and bodily sensation. Feelings are characterized by internal consistency, organized structure, and functional richness. Feelings can also be translatable into propositional attitudes, an attitude one has towards a state of affair. The expression, quote, I feel XYZ, unquote, indicates that individual is having an experience that has valence, motivation, and arousal, reflecting the individual's action tendency towards the object of that feeling. In sum, the feeling can be defined as a conscious mental representation that 1. Emerges from the physiological bodily states, neural activation, and environmental circumstances. 2. Varies along the dimensions of valence, arousal, and motivation. 3. Is related to allostatic aspects of survival and life regulation, reflecting the individual's action tendency towards the object of that feeling. As we discussed in the following sections, the emotion and mood are both encompassed within the affect and can be regarded as types of feelings, affective states, or affective experiences. Additional feeling types which do not fall under the emotion or mood are physiological states induced by sensory stimuli like sights, sounds, smells, taste, touch, and visual aesthetics, which also have the feature of valence, motivation, and arousal. So now we move on to the next term, that is emotion. What is emotion? Given that all conscious experiences are felt in a broad sense, the term emotion usually refers to a subset of feeling or a certain set of felt experiences. The breadth of affective experiences within that subset, however, varies a great deal. Some use emotion and feeling interchangeably, but exclude physiological feelings like hunger and thirst. In other cases, emotion is used more narrowly to denote affective experiences only on the higher end of valence and motivational scale, with high demand for allostatic regulation. For instance, fear, anger, surprise are considered emotions that signal significant departure from the comfort zone. But calmness, serenity, and pensiveness lack these characteristics and may not be considered emotion in this narrow sense of the term. Given the wide range of perspectives on emotion, this paper does not aim to be comprehensive review of these perspectives, but instead attempts to sort two broad classes of emotion theories based on their explanatory goals and consequent methodologies. The first class of theories that's addressed is philosophical theories, which tends to define, quote, what emotion is. And second class of theories that are discussed are scientific theories that tend to explore how emotions work. So let's first start with the first set of theories, those that are philosophical theories. Philosophical theories, that is, what of emotion? And these philosophical theories have been proliferating since ancient times. Their aim is to understand the metaphysics of emotion, or what emotion is. Philosophers of mind ask whether the emotions are in essence conscious or felt. While unconscious emotions have been considered, there is a widespread consensus that emotions are episodes of experience. That is, they are consciously experienced during a set time period. Some philosophers assert that it is the felt aspect that constitutes an emotion. Considering the emotion as an episode helps distinguish them from other affective dispositions, such as being an angry person rather than being angry in the moment in reaction to a specific trigger. Philosophy of mind and philosophy of language consider intentionality, whether emotions are about or represent something, a particular object. And if so, which properties, that is, the formal objects, are ascribed to that object by virtue of having an emotion directed at it. For example, you might be angry at a car, that is a particular object, on your morning drive by deeming it to be an obstacle, which is a formal object. To some, whether emotions are representational, that is, they're about something, distinguishes emotion from moods, which are not about anything in particular. Further, if emotions confer properties to objects, then they are subject to the epistemological constraints of correctness. Whether the knowledge that emotion conveys about an object's properties is justified or fits the facts. For example, you might be angry at a person who turned out to do no harm, which is a case where the property conferred on that person is incorrect. Some philosophers assert that these evaluative beliefs are what defines emotions rather than their felt quality. Now, considering the correctness of emotion also facilitates the differentiating between the type of emotion, an idea embraced by some psychological theorists. Another candidate for the essence of emotion is readiness for action. These theories define emotion as feeling one's body prepared for an action as an evaluative attitude towards an object. And finally, inactivist, that's getting ready for an action. Inactivist theories follow from the motivational approach, but instead emphasize that this is not unique to emotion. The entire cognition of a self generating organism prepares that organism for action in order to keep self sustaining. According to this view, this view was expressed by Varela, who's a cognitive scientist. According to this view, emotion might be considered a dynamic process in the continuous effort to self organize by making sense of an external world. All in all, the debate is far from settled, but the philosophical theories of emotion converge on what they seek to explain: the nature of emotion. What makes emotion what it is? The second set of theories that now we consider are scientific theories. Scientific theories tend to explain how of emotion. These scientific theories are found at the intersection of uh, scientific disciplines, whether with special interest in brain, that is affective neuroscience, or under a broader interdisciplinary umbrella akin to cognitive science. While these scientific theories may assume metaphysical claims about what emotion is, they ultimately gravitate in their central tendency to explain how emotions unfold mechanistically. From a pragmatic perspective, this paper clusters scientific theories of emotions that the scientists embrace. So these scientific theories are divided into the following sections or categories. The first one is basic emotions theories. Basic emotions theories claim that there are a specific set of emotion types that are natural. Different type of emotions are identified and distinguished by biologically basic programs consisting of innate and universal causal mechanisms and responses. The scientists who have endorsed or explored these basic emotion theories are Adolph, Ekman, and Cordaro, Izard, Levinson, and most notably, Panksepp. Under this assumption, the basic emotion researchers study specific physiological, neural, cognitive, and experiential markers as indicative of specific basic emotion types. Although the assumption that emotions type can be individuated by natural markers, however, has received theoretical pushback from other researchers. The second set of theories, scientific theories, are uh, grouped under what's called appraisal theories. Appraisal theories claim that emotion result from evaluations occurring across a hierarchy of information processing. Different appraisal theories differ in their claims about how the appraisal processes individuate emotions. One approach assumes that output from all appraisals is integrated into a master appraisal, which is the unique cause of discrete emotion types. For instance, appraisal ingredient may result in the appraisal of loss, which will pick out sadness as the emotion. The second approach does not claim integration into a discrete appraisal, but instead assumes that appraisal dimensions narrow down into infinite combinations that causally differentiate infinite type of emotions. The last approach of appraisal theories presents a stronger metaphysical claim, closer to evaluative philosophical theories, that appraisal does not cause the emotion, it constitutes emotion. So this is the last approach of the appraisal theories, and it's attributed to Clore and Ortney. Those are the scientists, and they claim that appraisal does not cause emotion, but it is actually what constitutes an emotion. Now we move on to the third set of scientific theories. These theories are grouped under what's referred to as constructionist theories. Constructionist theories counter the assumptions and methodologies of both basic and appraisal theories. Opposing the basic and discrete appraisal theories, the constructionist theories argue that boundaries around emotion types are not universal, innate, or fixed in cause, citing evidence that the associations between markers and emotion types are variable and context dependent. Based on this counter evidence, the range of constructionist theories have shared the claim that emotion types are variable constructions of a lower level ingredients, often more basic feelings or dimensions in feelings, even if they differ in which ingredients are involved and what construction means. For example, one constructionist theory argues that emotions are felt states that are accumulation of lower level bodily changes. This is from Antonio Damasio, and that's his somatic markers theory. Most other psychological constructionists instead steer away from the commitment to the bodily markers and home in on generic dimensions of neural activity. These theories often posit two specific dimensions of non-specific affective ingredients that are present as core affect across all cognitive experiences, whether emotional and not. And those ingredients are valence and arousal. Similar to dimensional appraisal theories, these have been studied through self report measures mapping various emotion labels along these two dimensions. These constructionist theories, however, oppose the assumption of causality in appraisal theories. Rather, they construe the dimension of valence and arousal as the emergent characteristic of emotion rather than the causal precursors. In earlier constructionist theories, one theory studied the process associated with those components at the reportable psychological level without attempting to track relation between precursor mechanism leading up to the specific emotion types, or even identifying a set of mechanisms that unify the construct of emotions. Another similar theory instead studied the variable categorization of these dimensions, often using operationalization of semantic knowledge, such as emotion labels, affective images, or videos. This was Lisa Feldman Barrett's earlier theory. This later construction theory from Barrett later morphed into one with a stronger opposition to causal appraisal cluster, denying emotions to be response at all, thus closer in metaphysical assumption to the constituent that is the third approach in appraisal theory. This theory by Lisa Feldman Barrett resulted from a rising predictive view of nervous system instead of a traditional stimulus response conception of cognition. This perspective presumes that neural organization is a probabilistic model among deep cortical layers that anticipate the incoming sensory signals in order to infer explanations for new neural information. Learning consists of updating this model according to its error in predictions, such as synaptic plasticity encodes the strengthening of certain parameters in the model. So this latest, the constructionist theory is based on the predictive coding view of the brain and cognition and affect. We will explore this predictive uh, coding view of the brain and affect in more detail in future episodes. But it suffices here to kind of summarize the constructionist view of emotions according to Lisa Feldman Barrett. Yet, according to the psychological constructionist theories, the mechanism for emotion is presumably that for all cognition, and thus ontological question of what distinguishes emotion from other affective kinds remain unaddressed. Indeed, what unites the psychological constructionist cluster of theories is that they do not seek to provide one process as the explanation for emotion. All in all, the metaphysical assumption among all constructionist theories, psychological or not, is that emotion is primarily an emergent feeling. The mechanistic hypothesis of constructionist theories have given rise to a rich literature of research characterizing the variability in emotional experiences and concepts dependent on bodily and external contexts, mutability across development and training. And it's the mutability across the development and training that is interesting rather than the fixed concept that's ascribed to the basic emotions theories. Although uh, the Panksepp will disagree with that characterization of basic emotions theory. Over the years, the scientific theories of emotions have proliferated within these broad clusters, as well as between and beyond. So, in conclusion, despite these different theoretical perspective on emotion, there is at least consensus that one, emotion are first-person conscious organismic states that are rooted in evolution and implemented in physiological and neural circuits, either specific or general purpose mechanisms. Two, emotions are driven by external or internal stimuli and inferred based on biological and or psychological significance. Three, emotions. The function of emotions subserves the survival needs via allostatic regulation. So these are the kind of summary points of what emotions are according to this paper. That's a consensus view by the researchers working on this Human Affectome project. The next term that we move on to that's discussed is mood. So we consider finally the mood. According to some philosophical and psychological views, mood is construed as not being about anything in particular, unlike emotions, which are about particulars, such as being afraid of or happy about something. Other philosophers deem mood to be about everything as a whole. Further views consider whether or not moods are directed at certain abstract, free floating properties unbound to any object, and perhaps projected onto new incoming objects. In affective science, there is a general consensus that mood is an extended, felt episode marked by a positive or negative valence that provides some information relevant to well being, even if it's unclear for which allostatic concern. Unlike emotions, which are relatively short, specific, and object related states that suggest action goals through physiological adjustments, Moods do not have such specific motivational functions. Compared to emotions, they are not only more prolonged in duration, but they are far more variable and context dependent in their behavioral manifestation. While moods do not suggest specific action repertoires, they still inform action tendencies, such as avoiding a certain environment as a whole, thus carry aspects of motivation. Moreover, moods themselves, in contrast to emotions, do not involve autonomic nervous system adjustment related to preparation and execution of action. To summarize, the consensus about the definition of mood is a prolonged felt experience marked by valence, motivation, and arousal. It is formally defined as the statistical average of reward, punishment, and their momentum. Mood does not pertain to any object in particular, but rather reflects the cumulative impact of multiple events, or everything as a whole. The primary function of mood seems to be informational, generalizing from one event to other related occurrences, and thus capturing the momentum of the environment. So these are the kind of consensus agreements about what constitutes mood. Now, finally, we move to the human affectome as a theoretical framework. As discussed earlier, the research into emotions have been tangled and discussed in pockets of inquiry. But Affectome Project attempts to present a kind of comprehensive view, a synthesized perspective that organism is an agent operating in an environment to alleviate allostatic concerns. This is proposed as a parsimonious explanation that unifies across aspects of affect. The Human Affectome Project considers affect or emotions along two categories, that is, allostatic features and allostatic concerns. Now, allostatic features as the experiential qualities of affective states, that has valence, motivation, and arousal, that provide information about how to regulate. Allostatic concerns, which is of interest in experience, the felt implication of sensory objects that infer to be allostatically relevant and actionable. So, allostatic features are, again, valence, motivation, and arousal of the affective experiences of each affective state. Based on the assumption of intentionality, affective experiences are about or are directed at intentional objects, the things that are being evaluated. These objects are important to an organism based on the allostatic orientation towards that object. That is the allostatic concern. An affective state's allostatic concern demands action to address that concern in the service of restoring organismic balance. Although this paper does not provide the full account, this can be formalized as a hidden conditional probabilistic state that an organism need to infer based on sensory data, whether that be through exteroceptive modalities such as vision or audition, or interoceptive modalities. In other words, an organism must use observable sensory data to infer non-observable allostatic meaning of that sensory data. This is a very critical point that helps us understand what allostatic concerns mean. So there's a sensory data coming to organism from both interoceptive or exteroceptive modalities. Interoceptive means internally from the body, exteroceptive, external sense organs. So an organism must use these observable sensory data to infer non-observable meaning, allostatic meaning of that sensory data. That what would this mean? How this data will lead to departure from the comfort zone and how to alleviate those concerns. Now, further allostatic concerns are defined based on distance from the present moment. Distance from the homeostatic impact of the action indicated by an affective state. The immediate to distal concerns provide a gradient or a scale pertaining to things in the environment that one can have affective state about, which can be interpreted as the complexity of action needed to address the allostatic concern. Of the immediate concerns, physiological concerns are the most immediate or concrete action required to maintain the organismic balance. This set of concerns, that is the physiological concerns, require action that affect the immediate internal environment of one's body, therefore dealing with the allostatic process in the most direct manner, given that organism has to perform action to address this. These are the physiological concerns, like being hungry, that organism has to address immediately. The second one are the operational concerns, the concern ranging from intermediate to distal impact on homeostasis, where an organism has a feeling towards an object and if acted upon proximal to the eventual impact on organismic balance. These concerns can be grouped under safety concerns about the dangers and objects that put the organism in harm's way, obstruction concerns about obstacles and violation of the organism's dispositions and goals. For example, a feeling is anger if it is assigned the property of being an obstacle to an object, implying that actions such as removing the object. Then there are epistemic concerns, social concerns, and moral concerns. These examples highlight just a few of many possible operational concerns. Uh, Although typically studied in separate fields, these concerns share a common structure whereby an organism operates in an environment and assigns properties to things and beings, implicating proximal but not immediate allostatic impact. These feelings imply a complex set of action over a period of time to ultimately return to balanced organismic state. These concerns vary in degree of complexities and abstractness, such as being angry at an object or being afraid of climate change. The more distal and abstract the concern is, the more causal steps would be required for achieving the allostatic impact. The third set of concern that is discussed are global concerns, like the trajectory concerns. These concerns are about the global direction or momentum that the experience in the environment points towards. For example, an environment can have a positive slope if few instances of positive outcomes imply further positive outcomes for many additional similar sources or further and larger positive outcomes in the future. The trajectory concerns can be seen as formalism of mood. For example, when you are in a good mood, the environment can be said to have been heading in a positive direction. The next one are the optimization concerns that are discussed. As the environment may allow for many combination of positive slopes, optimization concerns are about the optimal match between the organism and the environment. These concerns apply to the feelings related to well being, self actualization, fulfillment, and authenticity. The next set of concerns, allostatic concerns, are identity concerns. Self related feelings reflect the concern about one's global identity. In this case, the values and properties are attributed to self rather than to objects that are separate from the organism. Feeling words that refer to self as an object could reference bodily dimensions such as size, weight, age, and gender. Quote, for example, I feel young, I feel masculine. So these are identity allostatic concerns, but could also relate to the appraisal of self on domains such as mental capacities, for example, wise, smart, social aspects, humble, admired, or one's social grouping, devout. Self related feelings may also pertain to spiritual self dimensions, such as feeling words related to self determination or autonomy, self esteem, and personal growth. These concerns tend to withstand time or trajectory. When an organism comes to a conclusion about itself as an adaptive thing as a whole, although there have been a minimal formalism of identity concerns in the context of affect, these comprehensive concerns can be viewed as lasting self evaluations or probabilistic predictions about the self that have staying power because they are confirmed again and again by an organism's encounter with the environment. So, putting it all together, an integrative model of human affectome. Several principles arise from this synthesis. First, each affective state has the feature of valence, motivation, and arousal, which in themselves may be experienced as feeling. Affective states are anchored to allostasis and reflect allostatic concern. What that means is that affective feelings are about evaluations or concerns or departure from a comfort zone and how the anticipated departure from that comfort state is expected. Allostatic concerns vary from immediate to distal or concrete to abstract. Immediacy or concreteness is measured by distance to allostatic impact. How many actions or causal steps are required to achieve organismic balance? The immediate concerns are related to one's physiological or bodily needs. Intermediate to distal concerns relate to the organism's operation in the environment. And the global concerns do not pertain to specific objects, but rather to organism's overall trajectory, that is, mood, optimization, like general well being, and identity, self referential feelings. So, this is a sort of unifying metaphysical framework for affective phenomena, that is, human affectome. By synthesizing a large body of literature, this paper has converged on the definition that disambiguate the commonly used terms like affect, feeling, emotion, and moods. So this gives us a sort of overview of human affectome paper and provides us with a state-of-the-art understanding of the terms used in the current emotions research. And this will help us kind of understand the future episodes and research as we explore this fascinating field of human emotions research. And the goal of this podcast is towards the applicability of the insights from this research into everyday life and how we can make emotions work for us rather than against us. So, um, thanks for joining me on this first episode where we discuss the Human Affectome paper, and look forward to joining you for the next coming episodes. Thanks.